Are you warming up?
I was just sanitizing my hands.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Canada's Food and Everything Else Food Safety. I won't say safety, food safety podcast. I'm Jay Ash with Dominic here. Today we're diving into another topic that might not be on everyone's radar right now. It's kind of funny it says that, but I think it actually might be with all the situations that are happening around the world, especially in Canada, maybe also in the United States in some locations there. But it's all around what do we do with disasters and what's happening. So Dominic, are you excited to talk about this? I'm actually really excited about this because it's happening right now.
Yeah, I guess it's timely. It's also, again, it's sad, right? When you have to think about some of the disasters that are people are facing right now, and tough economic times. So people are stressed, right? They're going to lose $500 worth of food, right?
Exactly. So
they're going to lose anything that's in their freezer, in their pantry.
I've got so many questions around this.
And then in a restaurant, times that by 20. What you're in that business. It's food ingredients are your first or second number one cost compared to labor, and losing that is disastrous, obviously.
All right, well, let's cut to our tunes, and then we'll come back and let's get more into this because I got a lot of questions around this. This is good timing for this stuff, so stay tuned. All right. So Dominic, I've got lots of questions around this, and this is one of those things that I don't know if everyone really thinks about until it happens. Is that true? Like we don't think about these things.
I would say yes. I think we have a sort of like a half a slide in our training about it. It doesn't do us justice now that we're talking about it. I've made a note to myself as we review our courses to add more information on this.
Well, it's becoming, I hate to say this, but it almost feels like every week, not even every month. It's almost every week there's a disaster somewhere, either even in Canada, in the sense that it's happening almost every week in Canada. If it's not a flood, if it's not a tornado, if it's not a hailstorm, now it's a fire. Fires.
Yeah, those
there
fires
is a natural disaster.
Some of the floods and fires, they impact your business or your home for usually a lot longer, right? Versus maybe a power outage that might be from a storm of some sort. But the fires we're seeing where people are evacuated for days and sometimes weeks, a lot of times the power will be shut down to an area or part of the grid by the authorities to prevent more fires.
Yeah.
Right? So they turn the power off even though there's maybe no fire in that area, but the power is shut off to that area so that, if power lines get dropped or stuff like that, they don't cause more fires. So the power goes out, and, if you're a business in that area, you have the potential of losing everything unless you're back in there pretty quick, which is not, when they evacuate you, you're not usually coming back the next day. It's going to be,
it's sometimes weeks,
a week, or longer. Yeah. So when you talk about Fort Mac, those people, they're still, I don't know how many years later. Is it 7?
2016.
Oh, that's longer even. Yeah, it's like 7 years.
Yeah.
I don't think they have fully rebuilt there yet.
No. Well, that could be other podcasts that could be talking about insurance. So it's right. But I think that with the part, here's what I think we need to talk about today is, okay, so we always see in the media, in a sense, usually goes towards the homes, the houses.
Yeah.
They're obviously very impactful on people. Unfortunately, they have to go through this, but we don't really necessarily pay, like the camera crew is not running over to Jay's
No.
Diner to check on them and see what they're doing. But there's got to be a lot of things. And what are some of those things that you probably know from your experience that people should really focus on when they get the phone call and say, you got 24 hours, 48 hours, you got to be out of the city? What do you do?
Yeah, it's hard because you're probably faced with no business too, right? Because everybody's leaving.
Well, I know that's on top of the horrible thing you're going through.
I think you got to be prepared that unless you do something with that food, you're going to lose it. So, if you're in and out, if the power is out for 6 hours or 8 hours, probably the stuff in your cooler is not going to be okay, but your stuff in your freezer might be okay if you limit the entry in it. We would teach proper temperature recording and keeping a log of all that stuff. The reality is, though, you're probably going to lose it. So if you've got 24 hours, I would look to, can we cook this food and bring it to a shelter? Can we cook this food and make sandwiches for volunteers? Can we cook this food and just so that it's not a total loss? And that might not be possible. Obviously, the first thing is your personal safety and the safety of your staff, right? So if the authorities are telling you to leave, you leave. If they tell you you're on notice to be ready, then you get yourself ready and then you go and maybe cook that food or ask, hey, we've got this, we want to do this with it. Maybe we can bring it to the firefighters, or maybe we could bring it to the evacuation center, or maybe we could ship it out of town to where people are getting displaced to, right? So I think that's so that it's not a total loss. The thing that concerns us from the food safety perspective is the after part. And if people try to salvage things, they try and salvage things from the fire. They try and salvage maybe some of the food that, if you're out for 48 hours, hey, the stuff in the freezer, it's a little soft. It's kind of cold.
And that happened. That must happen a lot.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Because it costs so much. There's a cost
so much.
Now.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't take it unless you got a refrigerated truck or something. So what are you going to do with it?
Now, could you take it if you did have a reefer truck?
100%.
Okay, so you could take it, put in your reefer truck. It could go with you. Take
it to, maybe again, you're going to take it probably to somewhere that's going to donate it to, or somewhere that's going to has the ability to cook that food and again feed volunteers or feed.
So I have a question. I got a question on that though. So is it allowed for me? I've never asked this question before. Can I take the food out? So I have, let's say, some prime rib sitting in my freezer, frozen. I take it out. I put it in my truck, my freezer, reefer frozen freezer truck, which you've taught me about that recently, what they're doing, right? So I take that truck and I drive it over. It's still frozen. Everything's good. Can I take the food back now to my restaurant after the disaster?
Yeah, as long as is it okay? Where did it get stored, right? And is there technically should go from inspected facility to inspected facility, or inspected restaurant to inspected restaurant.
But I'm just going to let it sit on the truck in the parking lot.
Well, if it's a reefer truck, you could, because that happens. Okay. You could now, but now you got to have a record of it, right? So if you're a big business and you've got the ability to do that, that's smart, right? You might want to offer that to other businesses and say, hey, I've got a truck that can store 12 pallets.
I'm thinking it might be a business opportunity down the road.
Just disaster trucks, a neighbor, right?
Disaster trucks.
Yeah. To
side hustle number 4 for this
to salvage that food. I personally I wouldn't charge for that. I would say, let's maybe we split the diesel on running the truck.
But I'm I know it's funny, but these are the things that down the road, maybe it's 4 or 5 restaurants that pitch in and say, hey, we got to get a reefer truck, right? Small reefer truck, it costs X amount of money. I guarantee the food that you save will pay for that truck tenfold.
Well, especially if you I guess the extra challenge now. Imagine being in Yellowknife where food is double and triple already, right? And
Unbelievable.
yeah, so if you have the reefer and you could do it, yeah, I'd say do it. But keep a record of what you're doing, right? So now when you've got that in your to your safe place, you're going to monitor that refrigeration unit, every 4 hours, or the newer systems would have remote monitoring and lights and all kinds of great things.
Now those reefer vans, stuff like that, they have to be the same temp as your freezer.
Yeah, right? They've got to be 4 Celsius or colder, or if it's a freezer, it's got to be minus 18 Celsius. They don't. Would they run at minus 18? They're probably going to run at minus 15. Depends what you're storing, how long you're going to store it for.
Okay, so I've got another question. We've got lots of questions because this is a good topic. Okay, so I get the call, everything else. What am I do? Do I shut down certain things in my business, or do I just close down? Like this article that restaurantowner.com put out recently that I reposted on my site. It's with disasters. It says to shut down your bathrooms if there's water. I have a question on this water thing. Can a restaurant be open without water?
No.
Close down. Shut her down.
When you shut the water off, you're shutting everything down. You have to have water. You have to have running water, not just water. Okay. Now, if you never had running water in an emergency, then there's things to do around that, right? So that happens. A water main breaks outside, and that's technically an emergency for a business, right? The water main breaks outside of the front of your business. Do I have to stop operating? Public health is going to tell you, here's what we can do. If you're in a bigger city, they have portable water where they can help run your business. That's one thing. You can operate on bottled water sometimes, right? But public health has to approve whatever you're doing. Yeah. The challenge in that is if it's a localized thing on a small scale, public health is going to help you to try and make it work, because they know that in an emergency, we need to feed people. It's an important part of that disaster relief and the disaster whole thing that's happening, right? People need to eat. You might be giving the food anyway. You might be giving it away.
Yeah.
So you can't operate without water. You can't operate without electricity. If you had to, you probably could if you had natural gas. But again,
I used to do blackout practices in my restaurant, because it was always like Friday, the power would go out in a thunderstorm, and we did candles on table. We actually practiced it.
Yeah, smart. That's smart business, right? Especially if you're exposed to that a lot.
Yeah.
The challenge is, with the wildfires, we're blessed in Canada to have pretty good infrastructure in the grand scheme of things. It might not be good from a fire protection now that we see what's happening, but we have pretty good infrastructure so that those things seem to be not so frequent. But it really probably depends on where you live, right? How reliable the power is, how reliable the water is, right? If you're an older city, your water mains might break more often, right? Just because all that infrastructure below ground is a lot older, so it's subject to breaking more often. So I think having a plan in place, like an emergency plan in place, is smart. Bigger businesses that are, multi-unit chains, they'll have some sort of plan like that in place. Smaller businesses should, given what's going on right now, they should think about it and say, okay, what would I do, right?
Do you offer one, Dominic? Do you guys offer like a plan?
We have a document, I think, that's, kind of a general document. I don't even know if it's part of our course. That's why I said I made a note to.
Okay. Well, it's just, I think the thing is, when I ran a lot of businesses, like our restaurants, and we used to have from a sales perspective, when the sales went down, we had like an emergency book, how to regenerate sales. It's called this glass cabinet, and we'll talk about that one day. It's this really neat thing. I think there needs to be, especially with the amount of emergencies and situations coming up absolutely everywhere in this country, is that we need to have, and I think we need to also study and plan a strategy plan around fires, floods, outages, colds, like all these different things, not only to protect our business, but also to protect our employees.
Yeah,
right? Because you may have 10 people there. Now, there also needs to be a way of looking at what can you do when your community is down, or you can still be open. Because I have seen a lot of restaurants that will stay open to feed, the first responders, or they're going to stay open because they're the main gas station. They own a gas station as well.
Yeah.
Where all these different things. I think there needs to be some plans in place. I do recall possibly looking and building one back in the Fort Mac days. I can't remember. There was a lot going on those days. But what those procedures, and the restaurant owners got a really good article here. I think a lot of people should read that, go to their site. I posted on my LinkedIn channels, but it really just talks about some ideas that we may not think of during those critical, stressful, because those like stressful enough.
Yeah, and maybe we can put that link up right on our site as well, right?
Yeah, I'll add it in there because it's just some of the things to think about it. And so one of the things I want to talk to you, because I think you brought up a really good point there, is, okay, so it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, let's say, they're allowing us to go back in. What am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do with the food in the fridge and stuff like this?
Yeah,
it hurts throwing that stuff out.
It's so variable. It depends on how badly your business was impacted, right? So if there's certain stuff all over the place, your dry ingredients that are not affected by temperature control and that are in sealed packages. I'm talking.
What about if they're in chafing dishes, Dominic? Like saran wrap over top of over top of an insert.
Is it saran wrapped and sealed?
Yeah, just saran wrap.
Dry?
Okay.
Is it dry? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Prep. Yeah. Because it'd be prep, right? It'd be all that prep.
Yeah, those would be okay. Yeah, so those would be okay. A sealed bag of rice, a sealed bag of, it depends, what it's in, right? Most packaging now, you have a plastic liner inside versus just a mesh bag. The mesh I would be worried about. It depends on how much soot was around. Again, all that stuff is going to come into play. Your canned goods are going to be okay. Anything in the freezer and the refrigerator, if the power was out, if it was out for 2 hours, it might be okay. If it was out for 2 weeks, it's probably all garbage, right? It's all going to be trash. So now what are you going to do with that, right? We got to throw it away. We got to worry about pests. There's all these considerations that happen. And the big one would be cleaning and sanitizing everything, because you're usually in that business every day for 12, 16, 18 hours, and you've been gone for 2 weeks. There might be pests as an issue, depending on how everything was closed up. So cleaning and sanitizing, looking for pests, discarding any of the food that was opened, right? Obviously the perishables.
Now, I have a question for you. In the article, it says fire extinguishers, like if you use a fire extinguisher on some of your glasswares and containers, usually must be discarded. Is that true?
The fire extinguisher itself?
Yeah, like you've sprayed everything and it's got onto some of your cutlery and your plates. Can you salvage that? Or you
salvage the plates or the fire extinguisher?
The plates.
I don't know why they're saying throw them out. It depends on what the chemical is, I guess, in the fire extinguisher, right?
Like, is there chemicals in fire extinguishers that you couldn't wash off a plate?
I don't know. I'd have to look, Jay.
I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of it. But it probably depends on what the chemical is in the extinguisher. That I'd have to read that to see. I haven't read that article, so I'd want to look, because if it's, I want to know the source and why they say that.
Yeah, I just wonder if there is a sense that maybe it's just not safe enough to not take that chance. But have you ever seen one of those hoods fired at, like, go crazy?
Yeah,
it's not, right?
It's a mess. It really is. It's a really big mess, and obviously, so now maintenance becomes part of that whole thing. Are you going to have to recharge your system? Did it go, like, all those things are considerations when you start back up.
So what's worse, do you believe, fire or flooding?
Probably flooding. Well, the fire in the business, everything's destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So, but if it's fire outside and it's just smoke, a lot of that can be cleaned up, and you could paint, and you could do soda blasting or stuff to get smoke out, and there's a lot of stuff you can do. Flooding, I think, is harder because you don't necessarily see all the damage, so the stuff you have to throw away is probably a lot more.
So when you think about your like food safety and stuff, and you look at the food safety, do you have to call public health in then to approve you before you open up? Again,
they're probably going to come and inspect. Yeah.
Do you recall that? Like, you call them and say,
depends on what. Yep. So if you do a major renovation in your kitchen, you're supposed to notify public health.
Serious?
Yes.
What about the front of the house? What about the front, like the boots and everything else?
Probably yes. Now, they would be less concerned about the front. They would.
Yeah.
But it's really as what impact is that having in the kitchen and the service and the protection of food? So front of house, probably less, right? But back of house, hey, we're replacing the ceiling. Well, shit, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that are you shutting down? No, we're going to operate. Okay. Are you doing it at night? No, we're doing it during open hours. They're going to do a little section at a time. Well, how are you protecting the food from contamination while that reno's happening? Or the recovery, for that matter, right? Hey, I'm back from the disaster.
Yeah.
I've cleaned and sanitized my restaurant, or I'm going to, but I don't have a week to do that. There's people asking for food right now. So
not replacing the roof happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we've seen places that that they try and continue to operate during the disaster, during the reno, and they get shut down, right? They get shut down because public health comes in and says, hey, Bob's got a ceiling open up there, and there's dust and crap falling down from the ceiling, and one of your employees is over there making salad.
Yeah.
There's stuff falling all over the place.
So I have a question for you. How bad? I know this is totally off subject, but how important is that roof for food safety? I've never asked that question.
Well, it's I don't want to say it's funny. It's important to protect the food from contamination. That's what it's there for, okay? But if you think about it, if you go into a food processing plant, there is no roof. The roof's the roof. It's way up. It's 40 feet up, 30 feet up, and they still operate in there. So in a kitchen, they wanted to have a ceiling to protect the food from contamination on anything falling.
Yeah.
So if you had that, this is usually something that's flat, right?
Yeah.
And that's so that no dust and particles and bugs or anything that nothing can walk and fall into below and preparing the food. So that ceiling, the food code doesn't say you have to have a ceiling. It says you have to protect food from contamination. So this becomes subjective now for public health. And sorry, I'm just gonna. Somebody asked me if I picked up milk.
There you go. I love that. Only in a podcast.
Sorry, yeah. What's that? The first rule: don't answer your phone. Isn't that one of the first?
It's up there. It's up there.
It's up there.
It's in the top 5. Hey, milk.
Well, this was. I would call this a milk emergency. It's for my grandson.
Milk's important. So the roof's important. That's okay. I get that. And it does fall stuff down there. I want to talk about products though, because you were talking about that before. A lot of people try to reopen. They look at these products. do most products have a time frame? The door is sealed on that fridge. Are you talking a day or hours?
No, it's hours.
Really?
But it really, it's so variable depending on how much stuff you have in there. How if it's really big or really small, what the ambient temperature is outside, right? So if the power is off and all of a sudden it's in the middle of the summer and the inside of the building goes to 30 degrees Celsius,
Yeah.
the same temperature as it is outside, and your AC is not operating, well, everything in there is heating up that much faster. So now you might have had 12 hours and now you got 6 hours or 5 hours.
Yeah.
The design of the unit itself, right? Are people staying out of it? So
would they get an infringement like on their business? Like, would they get a big?
Well, public health will say before you open up, you're throwing away everything. Usually they'll have some sort of stipulation,
Yeah.
and like I said, if it was 2 hours, nothing. They're going to say play it by ear, right? Because 2 hours, okay. My refrigerator stuff, the really sensitive stuff might be bad. The other stuff, and you have 2 hours in the danger zone, but again, your really sensitive stuff, if it's on the verge and it gets up to 6 or 7 degrees, can you get it cold fast enough when you get back? Probably not. I would treat it all as contaminated, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
I'm assuming, and we're not professionals on insurance.
No.
But you're
right.
probably
And are you going to risk making your guests sick and yourself?
Is there food insurance? Food's getting pretty pricey.
There could be. Yeah, there is.
Really?
There's insurance. You have insurance for your food, but it's usually it would depend on the policy. There's probably a 1,000 variables in there, but it would depend on the policy and how much food you have. If you're a bigger place and you're storing a lot of food, you probably need that insurance, right?
Well, some steakhouses and some of those places that have millions of dollars caught up in their food inventory. Yeah.
Yeah. So that now it becomes important, right? And your deductible is going to be pretty high because you're not going to go make a claim for $1,000. You might have a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible before you go and make a claim.
Well, I know there's
temperature monitoring becomes important.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
There's insurance and there's like liquor insurance, all these other insurances. I've never thought that there would be food, but it totally makes sense because there's a lot of money caught up there.
Yeah, and that amount is much higher than it ever has been. And again, back to these remote places like Hawaii, food costs are higher there. In Yellowknife, food costs are a lot higher there.
Oh yeah,
they might be double and triple, right? So,
is there any businesses that really kind of are the ones that are going to be really? Like it's going to be the mom and pop sit downs, obviously, like the restaurants, the casuals and everything else that sits down. Some QSRs I'm going to think are going to be less so the ones that aren't going to be as affected as much as maybe the other ones are because no one's going to come and sit down in your restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to grab something to go and things like this. It is devastating to think about how many restaurants, like even just in Yellowknife, are closed right now, right? Like are just closed.
Yeah. Well, the city's evacuated.
The whole city, what's happening on BC and everything else. It's just another thing that these poor people have to deal with on top of.
Yeah, it's
hard.
It's really hard. It's hard on individuals. It's hard on businesses. It's especially harder on smaller independent businesses because they don't have those resources behind them to help them. Right? So I like your idea of getting together and say, hey, collectively, can we do this? Because it's a shame. Again, I would say to everybody, the first thing is your personal and your staff safety, and the food second and third or fourth, right? Wherever it falls after that. But the first thing is to make sure that you're safe and you can do what you're planning, to be safe. And the reality of that might even be when you contact emergency preparedness or the emergency agency, they may say, thanks, but we've got so much food being donated.
Yeah.
we have to throw it out, right?
Well, that's what Jim and the folks down in Barrie has pointed out here in the article that they posted here. I think it's a really good point, and I think this is one that I'm going to reiterate more and more on different shows that we talk about. But it's really around, they have it as a point here: keep the right attitude. And I think this other point in there is this Arnold gentleman, a consultant for a group out of Seattle, tells clients, be patient for recovery and be aggressive with the insurance companies.
Amen.
Exactly. Like that's what you got to do, right? And be sure to spend the money on marketing to regain previous sales volumes.
Yeah.
Keep your staff involved in the closure and rebuilding process. I think that's so important, is because I think a lot of times we forget about the people. We saw that through COVID. So many people, as soon as it wasn't affecting necessarily the business, but so many people inside the business that are affected, that have families and rely on that business as their income. And we forget about all those people. Like it really hurts, and I think the more and more, if you have a plan, I always say it doesn't need to be too elaborate as long as you have a plan. I think it should be brought up in staff meetings. It should be brought up, I'm thinking once a month nowadays, even if it is 5 minutes in your meeting.
Yeah.
Here it is, guys. We're all comfortable. You have to practice like a fireman does, like these first responders do, practice. So when the time happens, it's almost to a point, if it's more about when the time will happen, because it's crazy. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, look at our friends down in Sean Kelly Barbecue. He's doing sandbags right now. I was thinking of him over the weekend. He's putting sandbags together for the hurricane that's coming up to his restaurant. And he's talking about the same.
Where's he located?
San Diego.
Yeah.
So they're in line for this big. I think he just posted it's a tropical storm now, but he's probably dealing with flooding and everything else. But he's got a lot of people that work for him, and thinking about them. Plus, he's out there shoveling sandbags, right? So these are things I think you have to think about with your restaurant now. And it's horrific to think about it. You need a tech stack plan. You need a marketing plan, food safety plan. Now you need a disaster plan.
Disaster might come under crisis management.
That's a fancy way of saying it.
On the HACCP side, crisis management is part of.
Is it?
It is. You would ask it as much as it's for the crisis itself. Let's say it's a food safety crisis or a recall, which would happen often. That's an emergency in a food business, in a manufacturing business. It might also be for continuity of business, meaning I'm supplier X and I supply you with 4-ounce hamburger patties.
Yeah.
And you've got this proprietary blend that we make for you, and we've been your supplier for 15 years. We've never had an issue, but we're your only supplier. You put a food safety program in place for your business as part of your emergency plan, and one of the things that comes up in your emergency plan says, "Hey, Dominic's our only supplier of 4-ounce patties. He's been making those for 15 years for us. What if he had a fire at his place? What would we do?"
Yeah.
So if we're doing a HACCP audit, we would ask, as part of that whole bigger audit, okay, Dominic, in your business, at your thing, what is your emergency plan to ensure supply to the people you supply to? So for Jay's restaurant, you're counting on me. So now I have to say, well, I've got an agreement with XYZ Beefs that if we went down, they're in another city. If we went down, they would take over production for us, within 24 hours. Okay, well, that's a good plan. Or, from the food safety side, now we would say, like you said, hey, can I take the ingredients away and store them somewhere? Yeah, as long as it's somewhere safe, because we don't want to compromise the integrity of those ingredients, even in an emergency. So when I say, XYZ is going to make those burgers for my plant, the question from you to us, either directly or indirectly, is XYZ of the same caliber able to do your burgers safely for me, because whatever we replace it with, it's got to be this. The safety standards cannot be compromised. So in an emergency, those standards can't be compromised because we can make people sick, right? Sometimes they shut the water off. So now when they turn the water back on, they say, hey, you got to run the water for 5 minutes, right? Because we're adding extra, we're chlorinating it at a higher level because the water lines were stagnant for 3 weeks, right? So all those things, that's why before you open, public health's going to come and inspect you.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to say, yeah, you're all good, you're good to go, or no, you've got this, you've got this, you've got this, you've got this. What I was saying earlier is in the Calgary flood situation, there was some stuff that was maybe, people were serving coffee and public health was shutting them down. I think the important part to remember is like that, what you read from that article is the officials are trying to keep everybody safe without adding more injury to what's happening. So they have to, as much as we don't necessarily agree with some of the things, and some of them may be just way out there, right? The intentions are good. And there's a lot of times there's no time to sit down and have a 1 hour
discussion about it,
right? So the plan has to be, like you said, what are we going to do in 1 hour, if that's what our notice is, because sometimes it might be that quick. In Hawaii, it was minutes.
It was minutes.
It was minutes. That fire raged through.
But see.
So there's nothing in that situation. It's your personal safety that's first.
But there needs to be. I really think there needs to be some more books and checklists and templates and this stuff built on this, because
there's probably a lot out there. But like I think what you said.
Like I think you need to
about marketing. I got to worry about staffing. I got to worry about, can I pay my taxes? I got to work. Am I going to be able to repay my SEBA loan?
I have to add this. I have to add this to my damn list.
Yeah, I got to add that to my list. So, because it happens less often than all those other things, it gets pushed to the bottom.
It's a tough one.
It is for sure. But you know what? How much? I'm not defending not having it in place. I'm for having it in place. And I'm for, I like your idea of, we talk about this on building a food safety culture and having, that stand-up meeting, or in construction, they'd call it a lunchbox meeting, or a pre-shift meeting where you have, it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be super, super intricate. It has to be, can I plant this one little thought in your mind on, like you said, what do we do in this situation? So if it's only 5 minutes or 3 minutes, hey, I want you guys to think about this and let's talk about it tomorrow. What would we do if this happened to us, right? And then come back.
It's a little different than when I used to do the lights out, with our staff. We used to do lights out. So I'd be like, okay, guys, what do we do when the lights go out? Our POS systems are down. We can't take cash. Can't take visas, no credit cards. What do we do? And we have diners sitting in there that their food is coming out of that kitchen, because the gas usually always stays on and your power's on.
Yeah.
It was like that many years ago. I don't know if it's like that today, but you have your gas so you can put out your food. But how do you do that? Plus, how do they pay? So we used to go through all these practices and scenarios that would happen, because what happened, I think, that led me to that was, I think it was like 2 times in the summer that a good old prairie storm came through and took out our power. And we had a horrible power thing there. I don't know if it was the city I was in, but the power always went out. So it was like, okay. And then sometimes it'd be on it right away after 5 minutes, and sometimes it wouldn't come on for the rest of the day. And then we were stuck there trying to go, what do we do with a full house of restaurant because the food's being cooked, you don't lose the money in that. There's that losing money thing, right? So So we worked on that. And I remember having a part of shift meetings was, okay, guys, let's do what do we do? And then we had our candles set out in a certain area. Because I don't think they had battery candles back then, but we had it prepared. So if something happened, we were able to take care of the guests, take care of ourselves, make sure we didn't lose anything, and provide still a fun evening. And it did happen. I remember we had a plan, and it was smooth. And I think people need to think about those things as we lead into this whole new world of disasters every bloody time, and just making sure that we have a plan, or we've talked about it and this is what we do, and worst case scenario, it's even worse than that, right? Of something happening to your business that you're the only one, you're the disaster, right? Like you're the fire. That's happened.
Excuse me. That's the challenge in a small business. You know what? It's a challenge in a big business too, because a lot of times you have a leader that has so many things on their shoulders, right? And they're responsible for all of them. And in our training, we would talk about appointing somebody as the food safety leader.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
The most successful food safety programs that I've seen in big businesses specifically is where food safety became part of safety, and it wasn't a standalone thing. So in a bigger place, in a bigger business, you might have an OH&S, occupational health and safety team, as part of your business, right? You work somewhere, they have something like that. They have a safety committee, let's say.
Yeah.
So in a smaller business, can I do that? Hard. But can you do it? You can. So the challenge is restaurant turnover, staff turnover, all those things. But if the first step is what you said again, is I need to have that initial conversation. If it's
or even just like, do you imagine after what we're dealing with right now? Sorry to interrupt, Tony. Yeah. But imagine right now with all the situations we're dealing with, like right now, that we say, okay, guys, the next meeting you have, let's just talk about it too. Like, what's our plan? Like, and just having that conversation where the staff, and I think that's what Barry's article here has, is get the staff input. So who's going to be the person taking care of the coolers, the food? Who's going to take care of the staff? Who's going to take care of the communication? Who's going to close the doors? Who's going to take the people in the restaurant at the time if we have to close and it's packed? All these different things have to, so you don't scramble. And that's probably when a lot of decisions are made incorrectly, is when you're scrambling.
100%.
Right?
So we're a training company. Training, right? But it's so true. It's so true in any situation. It's emergency. Here's what we can do. Here's what we know. And if you talk about it enough, guess what happens? This is where repetition is important, right?
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you on this. This may be separate subject, totally different, but you made me think about that because I'm visualizing some of the places I used to run. Would you have a mustard space like to go to, like mustard, like where you go on? Yeah. Do you have a muster point? Do you have that in restaurants today, like where they have to go?
But if you talk about a plan, yes, you would.
Okay.
And you should.
You should.
Do most places have one? I would say no, they don't.
That's a good question. Now, can you make
we have one in the building I'm in. We have a muster point.
Okay, so why do they call it muster point?
It's British for something. I'm not sure.
Because I never asked that question.
You always blame the English, right? That's
darn you. So can you create one? Do you have to be assigned one, or can you create your own?
No, you create it. If you're your own little business,
yeah,
there's considerations around that. Obviously, it has to be a place that's going to be safe if something happened in the building.
Let's say there's a disaster. You only have seconds. Okay, look at what's happened in Hawaii. You have seconds, and you have a muster space. At least you know all your staff are there. You can count.
Well, yeah, but that now in that situation,
they only had seconds.
But let's say they only had minutes. Now, if you have a strong leader in the facility, my muster point might be in a point of danger in a situation like that. So I don't want to send people to the muster point.
So when do you send people to the muster point?
The muster point is when there's something in a muster point is if there's something in your facility that is going to be of imminent danger. A fire inside your kitchen. I got to get out of this building, right? I got to get out of my facility. I'm gonna go to the muster point.
So you have to learn about the muster point and the purpose of what that is.
Training.
Before you can, train. You need to be trained on it because
so we have
people into harm's way.
Yeah, we have fire and fire extinguisher training, as of course, that we sell. There's a little piece in there about that, but it's not part of it. That training, you have to have more than just that because all of those things matter, right? The muster point matters, but the muster point might be the dangerous spot because of something that's happened, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be near a fire hydrant because when the fire trucks pull up, you can't be in their way. That there's all those considerations. And the muster point might mean nothing because the local authorities are telling you, no, you have to be 12 miles away from the city, right? You're getting evacuated 200 kilometers south. So the muster point means nothing right now. So it depends. Back to the training and talking about these things every day. It has to be a good leader is going to do what you used to do. They're going to keep it into bite-sized little pieces because we want to keep their attention of our staff and we want to. And some staff might think it's a hassle. A lot of them appreciate it.
I was going to say, I think a lot of them
in today's world giving them that training and talking about these things.
It's your family.
For sure. They're part of your family, and people are attached to the place they work, and they stay sometimes in not great paying jobs because of how they're treated as family. So when you care about somebody, and everybody should do this, it shouldn't just be because you care about somebody. You should do it because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
There shouldn't be anything beyond that. We're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about hand hygiene today. We say, we say once a week or once a month, get out the local public health inspection that are closures of restaurants. Let's talk about the closure of XYZ. Why were they shut down? Do we have any of those situations here? And the same applies to these emergency evacuations. Hey, they're going through this, like we said, right? What would we do? The power goes out. It's going to be out for 15 minutes. We're going to do this. It's going to be out for days. Well, we're shutting down, right? We got to put this other plan into place. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow or more about that this week. Because you don't necessarily always have the time to do a 2-hour meeting, right? So, but if you do it 5 minutes at a time, you could cover a lot of content and really get everybody thinking in the same way you're thinking. And
so here's what my mind goes.
When you're engaging them, I think the really important thing is you're going to get their ideas and their good practices from maybe somewhere else they worked at. Because you might, if you're an independent owner and you've started a business because you've always made great chocolate cakes, but you've never worked at a place that had all these things in place.
No, but can they
give you for that information?
But can they get people like you, Dom, to come in and say,
for sure? We don't do that necessarily as a business, but there's safety experts that do that.
Okay, so you could call a safety expert, find it.
Hey, it might be expensive, right? Now, can I afford that as a small business?
What a great way to go in though and say, okay, let's put a safety plan together so you guys are safe and this and that. Now, obviously in the States, you would have like safety plans for some of the crazy things that happens down there with shooters and those kind of things and those pubs and those clubs, right? A lot of them didn't have safety plans and obviously some of them turned out horrible and some turned out okay. But I tell you, the more I think about this, there's a whole part of business here that needs to be done in the aspect of natural disasters, obviously human disasters and those kind of things. But there needs to be a plan put in place.
Active shooter is something that we're working on for next year. We're going to have.
Are you okay? Because that's becoming a big part.
I think that
unfortunately it's real.
It is. Yeah, it's real. Fire and fire safety. But the whole safety part in general, food safety being part of that, part of the package that we have in that Advantage program is slip, trip, and fall.
Yeah.
That's workplace safety. So the more we talk about those things, we have a respectful workplace course. People say, well, why would I do that? Nobody's telling me to do it. It's mandatory training in 40 of 50 states in the U.S. right now. Jeez. It's sad that we have to have a course, honestly.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, and continues to be, we're so pressed for time and so crunched for labor and labor costs because of all the other costs, the carbon tax, like I won't go into that, and the government downloading all these costs onto businesses and driving the price up of everything for no good reason. There isn't a good reason, because we're not reducing pollution, we're not reducing anything. We're just paying more for, to make somebody feel good. I'm not sure why. The pressure that's being added on all those things makes it even harder to operate, and we're losing small businesses and large businesses for that matter. Like, multi-unit chains are not, they're not immune from this.
No, that's the thing is that I'm going to say, I don't know if they have them. I'm going to have to ask.
Well, a lot of them will have some sort of emergency plan, but not all.
Not all, no.
And you would be surprised, right? And usually it happens because of some sort of disaster. People will be talking about it now, right?
You always say it, Dominic. You always say it's after the fact that something bad happens.
It's sad, but so true.
I just think about thinking about the people in Kelowna, the people in Yellowknife, all the BC, Interior, everything that's happening there. The floods that were happening out in the Ottawa space in Ontario and PI and Halifax. It's tough. And I just think about what they're going through as a business operator and owner, and just all the stress that you're going through at that time, and taking care of your people. And then you got food and everything else. I'm assuming most people would worry about the people first, all those things first, but still.
You hope, right?
You got a business to run, and
you hope that's the first consideration. Like we said at the beginning, right? Your personal safety and the safety of your staff is first before the food can be replaced, right? Yeah. It's going to be expensive for sure. The food can be replaced. The equipment can be replaced. Somebody getting hurt trying to save, a $200 or $300 piece of prime rib, and you have a lifelong injury for that. Yeah. Was it worth it? I'll give you a quick little story, Jay, and then we should stop because we're going on way too long here. About 6 months ago, maybe longer, I think it might have been August of last year or September of last year. We had a person call the office. The call got sent to me, and the person on the phone was, "Hey, we live in the country. The power was out in my home, and for 4 days or 5 days, I think she said. And when we came back, we went to the city. We came back. I have all this soup that was in my freezer, but it was, most of it's thawed. It was just a home person. Yeah. She had a deep freezer in her garage. Can I use it? I was like, no. She said, yeah, but it was, it's thawed, but it's still kind of cool. Yeah. So, well, do you know the temperature? What was the temperature when you left? Was it frozen when you left? Yeah, it was frozen. I said, okay, so it's been pretty warm, right? It's like, and then I was trying to be nice. My question at the end was, what's the value of the soup? Yeah. She said $40 or $30 or something. She'd made a bunch of ingredients. And I said, are you willing to risk your health or the health of your family over $30? Wow. And obviously the answer is no. No. But people don't look at it like that. And it's harder because older people, and especially especially in the food service. A lot of people get into food service because they've come from some other traumatic situation. We've got people coming from other countries, and food is the default business I'm going to open. We know most of them fail. We know there's lots of crazy things happen, but food is the one that I can start pretty easily. There's lots of used equipment around. We all think we're great cooks and chefs. Reality is, we know from the food service business, there's all these other things, right? So people have sometimes their whole life invested into that business. Very often, not sometimes, very often.
Yeah.
So the thought of losing a couple $1,000s worth of food is devastating, but it has to be weighed against your health and the health of the people you're serving, and the health of your staff and the reputation of your business. So if you're going to compromise that, you should not be in business.
I agree.
The number one obligation you have to yourself, as well as your business and the people you serve, is your health. Because without your health, you have zero. You have nothing else, right? Nope. So when you're thinking about, there's a saying in food safety: when in doubt, throw it out.
I've used that many times.
Yeah. If you got to think about it, or if you're wondering, throw it out. It's $20. It's $50. It's $5,000. That would suck. I'm with you. It would suck. But if it's gonna make somebody sick,
it's not worth it. It just ain't worth it.
And now here's the other thing. It's like what you said. You've said this before. Can you pause 2 or 3 seconds and think about, okay, what's at risk here? Yeah. And usually if you have that second sober thought, right, you would make the right decision. Yeah. And if you cannot get to the right decision because you're letting money drive that decision, ask somebody else.
Yeah, I agree.
And hopefully they will tell you what the right thing to do is.
Well, this has been a great conversation.
Safety, or the safety of others, right?
Exactly.
For any amount of money.
It just doesn't pay.
No.
But Dominic, it's been an outstanding conversation. And I think we're going to put this link to also the restaurantowner.com's article. Jim and Barry and the guys over there wrote this incredible article that, it may not fit exactly the situation people are going through or whatever it is.
Health Canada has some information as well.
Stuff too? Okay, good. So look at this stuff, and I hope it just gets people to think about it. So here, the article is fresh too. It's from April 2023, and as of it's brand new. It's a brand new article, but it says as of mid of April 2023. This is United States, so you have to tweak it for the Canadian marketplace. But there's been 494 tornadoes reported so far in 2023 in the U.S. So they're going through some major situations down there as well. In Canada, we're seeing these things pop up here too. It's fires and all. We had storms, tornadoes and stuff north of Calgary not that long ago. So there is definitely a situation like this brewing up everywhere. So I think this topic needs to be brought up in every restaurant starting tomorrow. Start on the first day that you have your first team meeting, and just have the conversations and start putting some plans in place. I never thought I'd say you need a tech deck. I never thought I'd be saying you need a safety plan for disasters, but I think you do.
Well, you do. Now, can you plan for every situation? You can't. You can't, right? Your book's going to be 40 billion pages. But right? Can you plan in generalities? Yeah, you can, right? And your plan might be your first thing to say is our first consideration is the safety of ourselves and our staff and the patrons we serve. And then everything gets second to that, right? So
at least you're on the same page. That's the thing.
100%. And then you talk about in a fire, here's what we're going to do. You might, that's a good time to bring up the muster point. We're going to meet here, right? Somebody's going to pull the alarm. Somebody's going to call the fire department.
Yeah. All
Here's the
those things in place. We know those.
the
You're
fire
not worried
department will
about
tell
that.
you, hey, where's the address? And the same with the, the ambulance, who's going to meet us, where is it going to be, especially if it's in a multi-story building. They're gonna guide you through that. You might not have that rurally, right? So, but the first step is, Jay, like you said, is talking about it, talk about it, train, talk about it some more, train, talk about it some more, and have your staff on board. We call food safety culture, but in the culture of, we say safety culture, even, you would say, is if you're thinking like that. So you might have, hey, I got a customer service mindset, right? To treat my guests properly, and we want to build around that because we're in the service business. If you consider your staff and your facility like your guest as well, and you put the same parameters in for safety like you would for your customers, it's going to be an easy transition to talk about that, right? So I would say start the conversation. There's thousands of resources. There's lots of resources out there.
I think I'm blown away. It's a good topic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dominic.
Thanks, Jay.
Tune in more for the Canadian Food and Everything Else Safety Podcast. And thanks again, Dominic. This is a great topic. Good conversation.
Thanks, Jay.
Today. And everyone else, tune in more. Thanks so much.
Cheers.